Hey everyone, Katie and Sergeant Steele here, and today I want to talk to you about replacing the antenna or aerials on our vehicle. So, for anyone familiar with Games Workshop kits, they often, especially the newer kits, have lots of fiddly little bits on them. And as an Astra Militarum player, one of those is the antenna or the aerials that are on the vehicles. The best that I can, I always try to repair these when they break. We bump them all the time. You snap them in half, you break them at the base or whatever. And I'll try to use plastic glue and put them back together the best I can. Sometimes repair isn't possible, whether they've just been broken too many times and the limit of plasticity has just been reached at all the different moments of connection on the plastic and you just can't put it back together, or at least in a way that looks good. Sometimes you have to come up with an alternative. A lot of people just get frustrated and they leave the antennas off altogether once they've broken off. For me, though, I do like the idea of having the antennas or aerials, as some people call them, on my vehicles. It was very common for us to do that when I was in the Army and to set up all of our radio equipment and how it worked. So I like the idea of having that on my Army also as I play and think about how my units communicate in the game and a narrative function. Plus, they've definitely taken the time. A lot of our new kits are more universal. Here's one that's been broken off, but we typically have now this two-prong connection where we have the loop aerial and you'll have an antenna coming up. But with that, it's the antenna part, the one like this that sticks up that's been broken. One way you can do it, if you can't repair it, is you can replace it with a piece of brass rod. So here I get a piece of brass rod. I can't remember the exact diameter. This is a more moderate one, but it's almost the thickness of the top of those antenna, not the bottom, because it does taper off as it goes up towards the top. So what you can do here is pretty simple. You can just drill a hole into that little base area. You can slide this down in there. And then before I did that, I also took a file, right? I took a regular file like this. And I just trimmed up the top a little bit, just kind of smoothed it out so it was nice and rounded. And then I put it in place and glued it in there. This here is a brass rod replacement. You can see it doesn't look too bad. Fairly simple. I could even, if I wanted to take it up the next step, I could add a little epoxy or green stuff down there at the bottom to give it that kind of larger base connection that they have out of the standard kit. But for quick replacement, it's not bad. And I put it down there about, I'm going to say 3/16, so a quarter of an inch in depth. And with that, it's going to hold pretty well. It's not going to break off. If anything, it's going to bend. So this is a good replacement if you do want that sturdy antenna. But there's another way to do it. The other way is to get this. This is heavy easy line and is typically used in model railroad and ship sets. It's a piece of rubber that's very thin, you can see here, but it's also very flexible. But you can paint it, you can glue it and everything else. And so this can have the effect of those kind of more flexible antenna the way you do have in the military. All the ones we had on our Humvees in the US Army had these flexible antennas. So this is a great way to work around that. So what do is you cut it off. I'm going to cut mine to about a quarter inch longer than I need because I'm going to try to drill a hole and get these down in there. So this is about 1¼ inches in length. I've already cut it off. You can also see real quick, it's got a bit of a cool color to it, right? I'm actually going to paint this black. So I'm going to use black primer, black matte primer in order to get it to the color that I want after I've glued it into place, but not beforehand. You could do that as well. I'm just choosing to paint it afterwards because I'm going to be cleaning up the details there on the bottom of the Sentinel. So let me show you how I do it. Okay, so what you want to do is get your pen vise and get a drill bit that's slightly larger in diameter compared to the rubber. Now remember that rubber line is very flexible, so it's going to bend as you try to push it in. So this is why you don't want something the same diameter, you want something just a little bit bigger. Grab your model, find the center point where your antenna should be going in, and begin drilling your hole. I hope I'm drilling this in the right spot because, yeah, there we go. I couldn't actually see what I was doing because the camera angle where it actually sits and where my head is right now. All right, so I'm going to drill in there. I actually want this kind of deep. I want a good connection point. So this can't just rip off very easily. All right, that's pretty good. You can check your depth by sticking in your drill bit, putting your finger on the edge, or even marking it with a pencil. So there, that is the depth that I have currently. That's not too bad. That'll definitely hold that antenna. Let's get to work getting our rubber put in place. One thing that I like to use here is a super gold super glue here. This is branded for Magnet Baron, but a lot of folks make it. I just really like Magnet Baron products, and I order magnets from him quite regularly. So I'm going to be using this glue, and I like this one because it does an off gas, so it doesn't create that smoky white after it cures or during curing. So what I recommend doing is take your model, take your little rubber antenna. We want to slide it in. Okay, get it all the way down in there. Now, it doesn't matter at this point if it leans forward or backwards because we can kind of rotate it around. See that? I like mine going backwards to infer the movement and the wind blowing. And then we're just going to put a little drop of glue here right on top. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to actually get one of my GW painting handles out, and I'm going to hold this up a little bit vertical. So as that glue dries, it's going to want to have this rubber kind of going up vertically. So I'm going to get that out and do that now. Okay. So there we go. So you can see there, I get the rubber antenna, right, being held up by this here. This super glue that I'm using does take a little bit longer to cure. So if you want it to set fast, use regular super glue, but this just takes a few extra minutes. So I'm going to leave that set, let that cure, and then we'll come back and get it finished up. Now that I have my antenna glued into place, I have it where I want on my Sentinel model. You can see there, because of the way I had it held when I had it glued, it's kind of already bowing back on its own. The other good part about this is it's flexible, and it'll stay flexible even after we paint it. So I'm now going to coat it in black primer. So here I have Vallejo black primer. This is an airbrush primer, but we can use it with our brush just the same. Now I'm going to go back and eventually add a layer of paint over this later. Now I don't need much, so I'm actually just going to pull a little from the cap and get a little bit on my brush there. There we go. And then we'll just go ahead and apply it to the antenna all the way up. Next, we're going to add a little bit of paint to the primer that we've placed on our antenna. So for this, I'm going to use Abaddon Black from Games Workshop. So I'm going to get a little here on my brush. I'm going to put it on my wet palette to thin it down a little bit so it flows on better. And then I'm just going to start applying it. I still have some down here, but I want to cover up some of the glue and damage that I've done and put a little more down there. To get the antenna, I think you're going to have to see how I'm trying to get every side of it here. And I hope you get that nice coat over all parts of that rubber. Don't forget to get in behind it. Yep, and just keep going around. Make sure you get all your black on there. Next, I want to do a little bit of Dawn Stone on the base of the antenna mount there. So I always view that as kind of a heavier piece of rubber, just because of the way that it is designed. So I'm going to do a little bit of Dawn Stone there to help highlight that. So once again, put it on my wet palette, thin it down a little bit. What I'm going to do is just try to put a nice thin layer of that right there on the base of the antenna mount. All right, there we go. Just tighten it, or just tidy up that black a little bit. The last step that we need to do is to seal our model. I always use matte varnish. I have the Winsor Newton matte varnish here, and you can get this in all kinds of different containers. This one just happens to be a nice glass bottle here with a plastic cap, but also have a very large version of this I use for my airbrushing. So I've already mixed this up. I'm just going to dip my brush in just a little bit. Won't need much here. And I'm begin applying this around the base of that antenna. It's mostly what I'm worried about with the paint chipping off, but I will apply some to the antenna as well. So now I got the base of the antenna done, or the aerial, depending on if you're from the UK. I know they call them aerials often. At least I've heard that. All right, so we'll just apply our matte varnish here. That will also help to stiffen up this rubber a little bit. So this way, as you are messing with it, I mean, it'll still be flexible, but it'll also stay in this position that I've kind of prepped it to be in. So that'll be kind of nice because I like this slightly bent, right? Slightly bent antenna, as if it's moving, it's got weight to it. And that's the way the ones on our Humvees were, our other vehicles in the US military. So there we go. I think I've gotten that pretty well. All right, we're just going to leave that to sit there and dry. And then our Sentinel is complete. And we have now done a replacement antenna without repairing the existing plastic one. So that's it. That finishes up the replacement of our antenna or aerial on our Scout Sentinel. So you can see there, it looks good from multiple angles. And definitely it's also flexible, even with the paint on it. So transport or playing with it won't easily break the antenna away. So it's a great little solution for your broken antennas on your models. Or maybe you could just start out this way if you want to. You could just go ahead and put those on there when you first build the model, and that's all right too. But just wanted to show you all this in case you weren't aware of this great little product, these little rubber strings, and how to get those on there and make them look like they're part of your model. So that's all I have for you today. As always, happy wargaming, and Cadius stands.